Good morning on this Erev Shabbos. In its quest to really understand what happened and to give an honest opinion and understanding how to make up for the mistakes, the IDF has been doing an investigation into what took place on October 7th. Not government policies, not intelligence that should have let us know what was happening, but once we found out what happened, how did the IDF react? And the first report came out on Kibbutz Beeri. And the reason why it was Kibbutz Beeri was twofold. Firstly, because that's the first one that's basically ready. And secondly, because the IDF wants to regain the trust of the people in the kibbutz and the general public in Israel, which was devastated by the IDF's lack of being able to protect its citizens. The whole idea why there's an IDF was after the Holocaust to protect Jews. And here they failed miserably. Kibbutz Beeri, which only has 1,000 people that live there, 100 civilians were killed, over 30 security people, another 30 plus were abducted. Nearly 20% of the community, 11 are still abducted and held in Gaza. It was a tremendous devastation. And Israel chose Mickey Edelstein, who was a commander of the Gaza border community who had retired before then, so he wasn't involved in that and was able to make an independent investigation. And the investigation was devastating. It spoke about how heroic the security officers were with their own handheld guns because they had no rifles, because the rifles were in the security room, which only had 2 keys, and both of the people that had the keys were killed on their way over by terrorists. But yet, they kept them away for hours, thereby saving hundreds of more people. And the fact that one of the security members even called and got through to Bibi Netanyahu on the phone himself, who promised help. But of course, the IDF was in disarray and shock. They never prepared for an entire community being taken over by thousands of terrorists, and failed them deeply. And it's very painful. And when I first saw the report, I skimmed over it. I didn't want to read it. But then I realized and I thought that it's critical for us as Jews, as Israelis, as the IDF, as the Israeli government, to read this, to understand it, and to get the most independent investigations we could so the IDF could learn from our mistakes and be able to say we made terrible mistakes, but we are going to do better, and we are going to learn better to protect our people. It's not something to run away from, but something to have the courage to confront and to deal with. And it reminds me of something in this week's Torah portion, which I want to connect it to. In this week's Torah portion, we read the story of how, after the devastating news that God tells Moses and Aaron they're not going to go into the land of Israel, and the Jews are ready to go in, and they come to the people of Edom, whose modern Western civilization, Rome, and they ask them just to allow them to pass by their land to get to Israel, and they refuse. And Israel offers to pay top dollar for anything they'll use, and to even for passing by. But the hatred, the irrational hatred, doesn't allow them, and they have to turn back, God tells them, and go around. And the Jews are frustrated. Here they were traveling for 40 years. They're finally ready to go in, and now they have to make a total detour through the desert. Take them more time. And they start complaining to Moses, we're sick of the manna. We need water. We need shelter. What's going on here? And God gets upset at their lack of faith. And the pandemic starts where the serpent, the snake, is biting people and they're dying. And they come crying to Moses, help us, please. And Moses turns to God. And God tells him to take a snake made out of copper, and to put it on a stick high up. And anyone that's bitten by the snake will look at this copper snake, and they will be healed. And the question the Gemara asks, we know that in the time of Chizkiyahu, this copper snake, which God said they should put as a testimonial to him protecting the Jewish people, people started worshiping the snake itself. They thought this copper snake had healing powers, and it had to be destroyed. And the question is, why would God tell the Jewish people to make a copper snake to look at and to be healed? The copper snake was that which bit them and hurt them. Why would you look and make a molding of something that hurt you in order to find healing? And besides, the Gemara clearly says that really it wasn't about the copper snake. They looked up to heaven, and when they looked up to heaven to the copper snake, they reminded themselves that it was God who gave them healing. So if that's the case, why make the copper snake altogether? And the Rebbe, in one of his talks, says something very powerful. The Rebbe says sometimes we have something that hurts us, something that gives us tremendous pain, and we try to run away from it. because it's painful, it's bad, it's evil. But what we don't realize is that when we look and face and confront this evil and darkness, but we look at it from a vantage point above, we look up with the strength of God, understanding that all comes from God, and having the courage to confront this, we're able to find healing through that itself. Think about it, says the Rebbe. Some words, all you have to do is reconfigure the letters of the words and it has a different meaning. It brings in a different energy. The same word that meant something painful and bad could be reconfigured to mean something positive and encouraging. And that was the message that God sent the Jewish people. He said, look at the snake that bit you. Don't run away from it. Look at it, confront it, but look above. Look at God. Look at where it comes from. Don't see it from the vantage point below, but to see what you could glean from the cracks to be able to find healing and courage. It's a very powerful idea because we all have pain and struggle in our life. And the question is, do we have the courage and the strength to confront that, the trauma, the pain, the suffering, and to find healing from within? And that's what Israel has to do now. It's already 9 months since October 7th, but I don't think there's any Jew that has gotten over that trauma, that pain, those memories of the first days, and of course everything that's happened since. But we have to have the courage not to run away from it, but to confront it, to see our failures, to see our mistakes, to look up to heaven, to recognize, to see it from the vantage point of God, see the message He's sending us, better ourselves, better our community, better our unity, and better our preparedness to protect every single Jew wherever they may be. Because ultimately, we're raising a generation of the most heroic soldiers. Just this week, the Israeli cabinet voted to extend back Israeli service to 3 years from 2 years. These young soldiers and reservists are some of the remarkable people, a new generation, high-tech people, geniuses, courageous people, people that have succeeded in business, in academia, in building families, and yet they're ready to risk everything and to give it all up to protect their people. If there's any hope that we've seen out of all this that's gone on through October 7th, it's our soldiers, it's the Israeli public, it's the young, it's the future. We have to have the courage to look at that snake with all its pain, but to look up to heaven and see it from the vantage point of God and find the strength to rebuild stronger and better and more united. Because ultimately, Am Yisrael Chaya, Netzach Yisrael Lo Yishaker, the eternity of Israel will not lie. We will prevail and become stronger. Have a good Shabbat.